All right, so we're back today, and this time we are going to, we're going to come back to a book we talked about quite a long time ago, Human All Too Human, but we're going to talk about the second half, volume two, maybe you could say, of Human All Too Human, which consists of two parts, Assorted Opinions and Maxims, and The Wanderer in His Shadow. And this time we're talking about Assorted Opinions and Maxims. So, but actually, all those videos in between this one and the last one, those are all just prepping for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That's why all those videos were in between. There's the big break. Yes, in case you're wondering. Yeah,
we're just letting it stew over here.
Yeah.
Cooking up big for you.
Thinking.
Yeah, right. And if that's not bad enough, Nietzsche just rubs it in aphorism 128, right? Which is a wonderful aphorism in which he's probably more honest than he's ever been. Because he'll never tell you this again. So everybody you better perk up your ears and listen to what Nietzsche's saying in 128, which is very, very, very honest. He says, against the short-sighted, do you think that this work must be fragmentary because I give it to you in fragments? Yes. Okay. Like if you want a clue as to how to read Nietzsche, there it is. He's actually just telling you. It doesn't get any more plain than that.
Yeah.
These aren't just aphorisms. These aren't just one-liners that you say at the end of a party or something, right? They're linked together thematically via lots of thought and ideas.
Yes.
So,
and that's one of the most I find one of the most rewarding things when you read Nietzsche is rereading Nietzsche and reading Nietzsche for the third time and the fourth time, and there's just these endless connections you can find between all of the passages. They don't sit alone in a void. Right. It's just like he says in this 128, that it's not fragmentary just because he presents some kind of fragment. Right. And like this is like for this first reading, we read sections 1 to 180. And this is one of the most difficult things for me, though, is just coming to grips with how layered this work is, how much is here and how to tease out everything he's trying to say.
Yeah, it's so thick. There is so much on every screen. Oh wait.
Oh God! Wow! Thank you.
And no, it is thick. This is layered in a good way, not in a George Lucas way. In a very good way, this is layered thick. I'm even surprised, like third or fourth going through this. I mean, still finding connections and things echoing through each of the passages and subtle ways that each conversation links to the next one. It really is a work of genius. I mean, if you really sit down with Nietzsche, if you really pay attention to him, not in his fiery moments, like at the end of like the Antichrist, and I love all those works at the end, like the end of Zarathustra. Those are fiery and intense, but everybody should sit down with Nietzsche in his early days.
Definitely.
And really, really sit down with him and listen to what he's saying and really think about it and not just read it once. Nietzsche deserves at least twice. And I suggest you give him a third or a fourth reading to really give him a fair shot. And he has tied these things together. You won't be disappointed.
Yeah. I mean, kind of just as leading into this book, one thing I always find it disappoints me when people talk about Nietzsche sometimes is I think they miss how layered the text is. They say just weird things like, well, it's full of contradictions, or they say like Nietzsche is so extreme. Like, no, really, no. Like, really, he's never really like comically extreme anywhere. Like he's always found this. Whenever you try to pin him down like in some extreme, he's already thought of that, and he's thought of the opposite too, and he's come back in between these two to find some middle ground, some more subtle ground.
He's very careful with his wording, and I know why, because he's saying like, well, the most powerful cause is this, or one of the biggest reasons is this. I mean, you won't find him being extreme in the sense that people take him for.
Yeah, I mean, like it's not like he has. I'm not saying he's bland opinions either. I'm just saying like people really try to pin him down way too easily, without like giving the text at least 3 or 4 readings and trying to figure out how all these work together. But maybe people do just give up and say, like, oh, it's fragmentary. We can just take these one at a time and just kind of take that as his opinion. Kind of universalize it as his opinion. Hey, fitting that right in with the theme of Assorted opinions and maxims.
Yeah. People don't know how to read or watch movies. So one day I think we should make a video about that.
That would be really cool. I think we should too.
At least just give it a chance and don't be afraid to dig down into Nietzsche. There is something there. Sometimes there's nothing there to a word, right? I mean, sometimes you go in and you watch, I don't know, a Ghoulies or something. Not Goonies, Ghoulies. And, you know, there's nothing more there than what's there, right? But Nietzsche, there's so much down in the depths. So don't be afraid to jump in. Mostly, I know you're not jumping in because you're just lazy. I know you're lazy. You're all just lazy readers. I know. I'm talking to you, internet.
Lazy readers on the internet, impossible.
No.
Nah.
People that don't know how to listen or read on the internet and don't actually, think about the context. No. Impossible.
Just want to jump all over someone's opinion and stomp all over them and throw them away and then never come back to them again. Nah. That doesn't happen on YouTube or on the internet. Stop lying.
There's never drama like that. So, and that's actually kind of funny. So let's start there. Let's start with YouTube. There's this hashtag going around these days called "What's destroying YouTube?" You know what that made me think of? Passage 1. Disappointed of philosophy. If you have hitherto believed that life was one of the highest value, and now you see yourselves disappointed, do you at once have to reduce it to the lowest possible price? And I see it. I see in some of my people we follow and some people we look at, like, hey, let's name names. There's a bunch of people out there: Sequester Zone and Zenistrad and Hannibal and all the people fighting a war of their own. Right? They know what war they're fighting, and recently they've fallen into a bit of a civil war. But anyway, let's just say that they've hit a few snags in their life, and they hit a few brick walls when it comes to people really listening to their opinions on the internet and on YouTube especially. So what do? Okay, well, now let's go to join this hashtag. YouTube's trash, right? Okay, yeah, I understand your disappointment in a forum like YouTube. It really doesn't make for a great conversation piece. The comment section is garbage, and Google has a lot of responsibility for that, putting the garbage comments up on the top. Yeah, there is a lot of garbage there, but what has changed in YouTube, really? Not much. Okay, you can't do response videos anymore. Oh no. Okay, YouTube is destroyed. No, it hasn't changed. There's just more people here.
Yeah.
So if you want to call that destroying YouTube, yeah. But that's the spirit of this one. I mean, in the same way that, when you set life up on a pedestal, and you find out that, maybe it's not made of the purest things. It's made of a bunch of squishy meat. There's no reason to start despairing and falling into some kind of nihilist, crying fit. There's still something going on here, right? There's a middle, just because there's no meaning written into the universe itself, like written into the structure of the universe. Okay, well, that means nothing means nothing. And there's no meaning in the universe at all.
Life is garbage.
Yeah, it's all just a hellish nightmare, and it's all over. Okay, I normally don't want to beat up on emos, which, again, as a famous great man once said, emo is another word that doesn't really mean anything. But, this kind of attitude sometimes exists, right? Well, if there's not a meaning written into the universe, well, the game's up.
Yeah.
Right? What's left? Well, there's a lot left, actually. And you know what? Nietzsche is the first philosopher to maybe confront that, don't you think?
Oh, I agree. I totally agree. I mean, I think a lot of a lot of chunks of Human to Human, just the first volume of the work, really felt like him looking at this problem and trying to come to grips with it, and maybe trying to analyze, how did we get here in the first place? What was it about our hopes that started to trip us up? And maybe how can we get out of this too? And I think this is continuing right into volume 2 too. He's going to start taking a look at, what about our thoughts made us get here. And like you said, like in the section 1, I'm going to throw something out here. I don't know. This is, I'm finding it's difficult to articulate, so I'll just throw some maybe not such a good articulation out, maybe, and hopefully I'll have something better in the following weeks. But Well, in a way, people don't like ambiguity. They don't like the fact that they can't deal with the fact that maybe there are bad parts of you and good parts of you. Maybe some of the good parts are intertwined with some of the bad parts, and maybe it's not as simple as, you know, I'm good and he's bad, or this is good and this is bad, or the universe is good or the universe is bad, or I don't know. It's kind of led me to thinking, like, and this is kind of just going to go through the text a little, like, because of this fear of ambiguity, I thought this of a very bad metaphor for this. This is terrible, but like it's almost like, but keeping with the theme of human all too human, the first part of human all too human, where he talks about chemistry. You know, it's almost kind of like saying, well, salt is sodium chloride, and salt is great. Salt is delicious. So that chloride can erode metal, and that's bad. So salt couldn't possibly be sodium chloride. Salt is good, right? If chloride does something bad, how could that be part of salt, right? And then, like, but people get into this mode of thinking, like, well, you know, if there is any bad part of me, any vain part of me, any egoistic part of me, then that's detracting from me somehow. So they get into this mode of, actually, it flips. Like, instead of hating the ambiguity, how should I say, like, they start to hate certainty. They hate the pursuit of truth. They hate the investigation itself, because they're worried about the investigation's going to come back and bite them a little bit. It's this weird flip, but at the same time, it's the existence of this ambiguity in the beginning that gets them worried as to avoid facing some of the more dangerous truths about existence, some of the more certain things you can learn by self-examination about your motives, per se. I think that's kind of how he's getting started. I did like his book is obsessed with free spirits. So just section 11.
Oh, we're jumping right to 11 already. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think 11 sets kind of a tone.
Yeah, this is where, I mean, you should really perk up your ears here too, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's really talking about his situation, right? He says, the pessimist of the intellect, the truly free spirit, will also think freely regarding the spirit itself. It will not dissemble, that would be cover up, over certain dreadful elements in its origin and tendency. On that account, others will perhaps designate him the worst of the opponents of free spiritedness and inflict on him the abusive title of pessimist of the intellect, which they will do because they are accustomed to call everyone not by those strengths and virtues that distinguish him, but by that in him which he most differs from them, right? But I think this kind of the situation Nietzsche kind of feels like he's in. He wants to be honest about some of the not so pleasant aspects of our motivations, but going back to what you said, like, but he's not trying to say, well, we suck. Like, it's weird. Like, people like take Nietzsche saying, like, no, we suck. Yeah. That's not what he's saying. That's
like, again, some kind of Satanist from hell.
Yeah, like, mankind sucks, death to man. Right, yeah, it's exactly right. That is not what's happening here. It's a little bit more subtle than that.
Yeah, or a lot more, right? I mean,
yeah.
And fundamentally, this is going to be where, I mean, Schopenhauer helped here too, but this is where philosophy begins to realize, you know, there's this thing called psychology too. And maybe Nietzsche is going to have to work in a little bit of psychology and into his thought here, or into philosophy in general, because this is where we start to realize that emotions are one of the driving forces. I mean, hopefully people other than philosophers had realized this before, but the emotions are one of the driving forces in our life. In fact, they're innately linked not only to, you know, the way you live your normal life, but how you think in general. Emotions are the driving force behind actual thought. So wow, we jumped right into 11. Like, this is going to be the overarching theme here. It's a very, let's just put it like this, it's a very Darwinian kind of theme. Maybe, you know, Nietzsche was just around during the time of Darwin, and maybe more today we can kind of resonate with this because, you know, the Darwinians and all the atheists today, they're often more blunt in saying, like, look, small, silly, kind of small, simple things can form together to make very complex, interesting organisms, right? So, in the same way, kind of more, I don't know, in a traditional sense, dirtied or our bad motivations can be the backbone to the most glorious things that people have accomplished.
Yes. Yeah.
In history. And specifically, he's going to talk about vanity.
Yes.
This one is especially going to be about how vanity has shaped history, good and bad.
Yeah, right. Exactly right.
Bad. I mean, so if you know evolution well enough, I mean, if you study color, and if you study enough, you know that we're not oriented towards. Evolution doesn't orient us towards the truth. There's no reason to orient us towards the truth. It's oriented towards survival. So we see the colors, or we distinguish colors enough to survive, and that's the number of colors we're going to see. And then we interpolate all these other kind of data in here. Not that there's color in the world at all, but this is how we are. In the same way, we are not oriented towards truth, right? I guess is what Nietzsche might have to say eventually, is that we're not out there in the world like robots digging up truth for truth's sake alone. There's just not as much of a motivation to do that. So he wants to find the motor behind it. That's not, by the way, it's not being this kind of relativist. He's not saying, well, there is no truth at all. Yeah. You know, it's all just
give up the search. Just give it up. It's stupid. Yeah.
This is not that at all. This is looking at the underlying motivations towards our will to truth. What is going on back there? This is going to be important because it's going to affect the way we come to the truth and the way we think about the truth. This is such an important point. Nietzsche is not saying, well, 2 + 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. It's all relative, man. In this part here, he's examining the underlying structures of our motivations toward knowledge. This is going to be a very important point to grasp. So don't go off the rails here, please.
Yes. And I mean, just if you're wondering like where this is coming from, this is definitely section 98. I think backs you up the most when you talk about this, where he talks about honesty and play acting among unbelievers. But he says this point, he says, in the middle of that section, he says, if we had not remained to some extent unscientific men, what meaning could science possibly have for us? Taken as a whole and expressed without qualification, to a purely cognitive being, knowledge would be a matter of indifference. But again, like he said, he's not like cheering on the just throwing this away. He's saying, like, how do we get here? How did we get to this good thing, this pursuit of truth? And I want to just bring, like, again, somebody I love very much, Bernard Williams. I love this point he makes in like one of his a book from a long time ago called Morality. And he says, when he talks about subjectivism in morality, he says, he's talking about science and the pursuit of science. And he says, we cannot in particular conclude that since science is objective and morality is not, we are objectively justified in devoting ourselves to science, while only subjectively justified in protesting against injustice. For devoting oneself to science is as much a practical activity as any other, and there is no more reason why that one should be objectively justified rather than any other. Justifications for doing objective subjects are not objective. Justifications for doing these subjects, or they're not objective justifications doing these subjects any more than the fact that there are deductive justifications of the theorems in the Principia Mathematica means that there are deductive justifications of the projects of reading, rehearsing, or discovering the theorems of Principia Mathematica. All these are instances of that strangely tempting fallacy, the fat oxen principle. He who drives fat oxen must himself be fat. Right. So just because you're studying objective things doesn't mean you're an objective guy. Right. I mean, it doesn't necessarily come together. And I think Nietzsche saw this quite a while ago right here. This
I mean, and I wonder if a part of Nietzsche's fear, at least even maybe even later in his life too, and you could see it, is that he's worried about people that have such a simplistic view of the world that they think that, for example, if only people would not be vain,
Yeah.
what a wonderful place the world would be. And he's thinking about these people, and maybe he's thinking it'd be just as crazy if someone were to say, if only it wouldn't rain,
Yeah.
then what a great place the world would be. I mean, this is such a foolish thing to say. Well, I don't want the rain. In the same way, like, well, I don't want the vanity. And part of his mission here is to say, no, that is part of the good too. As much as you don't like it, as much as you've been kind of brought up by whatever Christianity or whatever moral system you've got, it's taken a one-sided view of the world. And this is dangerous. And, you know, I guess this is why he ends up thinking hypocrisy all the time sometimes. Thank God we don't take our moral theories actually seriously, because we might die of them. He says this later. But this might be one of the reasons, right? I mean, we might be uprooting, unknowingly, uprooting the motivations, the very motivations we have for discovering truth.
Yes. Yes.
So he takes his project seriously. It's not as if, like, again, he's not saying, like, give up, everybody. You know, do whatever, man.
Make stuff up. Just make stuff up. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just writing whatever down here. So, you know, whatever. Do whatever. That's not what's going on here at all. So again, great things having lowly origins,
Yes.
vanity. This is going to be repeated again and again and again. I mean, this echoes throughout the book.
And I kind of like, along this theme, I think, kind of alongside of this and with this theme,
vanity is going to spread out to everything here now.
Yes.
Right?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's going to spread into everything. He just like lists example after example of this in the first part of the book about all of these kind of at the base level. What might be here are kind of different kinds of vanities, different kinds of fears, and he even takes in a couple sections. He actually lists like what might be some of the benefits from some of this stuff too, where he talked about. There's one really interesting section where he talks about just like the very idea of considering ideas as though they are people.
Yes,
like this kind of error. Yeah, he calls it. It's kind of an error. They're not people. They're just ideas. But like this error kind of brings about what he thinks it brings about the intellectual conscious, which he likes, by the way. He thinks that's good, but it's the product of a kind of. He thinks it's a product of a kind of error. It's treating ideas as though they're like players in a battlefield, or they have like moods and like they strike you the wrong way, or
maybe even more importantly and interestingly too here is where he starts kind of suggesting that we treat ideas as if they're our children. Yes. And we care for them and we feed them and we even marry them to other ideas, and hopefully that marriage will bring us fame and honor and pride. And eventually, he says right here, his work after this talking and kind of relating to it as a person, it becomes part of his ego. He transforms himself into the all-defiant, right? So this is going to be an important theme, and it's one that maybe is more obvious in today's world of authenticity and all this talk. But yeah, your ego is wrapped up in your ideas in a lot of ways. And yeah, anyone that's been on YouTube, yeah. You know what I'm talking about, right? There's a lot of ego wrapped up in ideas, and good reason. This is some of the reasons why. I mean, this is what motivates us to have opinions and strong opinions and search for the truth. But at the same time, it's a very dangerous thing. I like this in connection with the other passage where he talks about why it's so dangerous. What's more dangerous, being the attacker in an argument or the defender?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he says, well, it's not as morally dangerous to be the attacker, because when you're in the attacker in an argument, you can probably keep your cool for the most part.
Yeah.
He said, what's more difficult is to defend your opinions and not become basically a monster in the process, not to lose, to basically explode. And this is the reason why. Right, being the attacker, I mean, you can attack someone else's ideas, but at the end of the day, it's not you, right?
Yeah.
When you're defending yourself, that's when it starts to become personal, like Jaws or something, right? Like it actually becomes really, really a kind of a thing about identity more than the idea itself. And as comical as this is on YouTube, and it is comical, and as disgusting as it is, you know what? I mean, maybe we just kind of have to accept that this is one of the fundamental motivations to knowledge, like it or not.
Oh yeah, yeah. I agree with you on that. I think that's kind of where he wants to take it to. It might not look all that pretty, but it drives you forward. It drives you to like back up or supplement or defend your opinions. And I think what you said about where I like that section too, where he says about like defending your opinion is kind of like the test. It does resonate even later Nietzsche, where he says the true courage is the courage to have an attack on your own opinions. The true courage is not to have the courage of your convictions. It's to be ready for an attack on your own, right? In other words, like how ready are you to defend what you have? Like how much of an intellectual conscience do you really have?
Yeah, and I mean, even he breaks down in this section too. Just I thought was really clever is why people would be interested in the true over the untrue, right? I mean, we talked about this in the tetralogue too. Like, why do we prefer the true over the untrue? Well, vanity, right? Because it brings us honor and it's useful. And if we fail at it, there's fear of humiliation, and there's the motivation we need to get to truth.
Yeah.
Again, the motivations for truth. Why would we be a people who would prefer telling it as it is as opposed to telling it as it isn't?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this can get us there. It doesn't always get us there, but I mean, that's not the point, right? He actually, it's interesting later on in the book, he talks about how similar things happen with the virtues.
Yeah.
Like when things that maybe when we start, we have pretty crappy motives for our virtues. Maybe we're generous out of fear. We're kind out of a kind of revenge, maybe even.
Yeah, we're honest out of vanity.
Yeah, or even honest out of revenge. But he makes the point that like when you've gotten to that level, when you've achieved that, when you've achieved the level of virtues, things start happening at a higher level. Things become sodium chloride, right? They become salt and not just the elements at the bottom, right? Your actual motivations start to change as soon as you're hitting these higher level goals. But that's not to say you can eliminate the lower level stuff too, right? You need to get there somehow, right? You need to get up to that level somehow. I almost thought of it almost like, the problem that Aristotelians almost face in virtue when in getting people to virtue, right? How do you get a child to become virtuous? I mean, children don't listen to you. They don't sit down and be like, well, how can I be magnanimous, right? I mean, the children don't know why it would be a virtue to be cleanly, right? I mean, you force them to have these virtues. You force them to do them, and they do it out of fear. They do it out of anger. They do it out of just any sort of like motivation that's not the right one, the one you wanted per se. But after a while, they get there. After a while, they start operating with a different set of drives. But it takes some lower level backing up to get up to that point.
Good. I like that analogy. It's really spot on, I think. So where do you want to go from here? There's so many things. Like
what do you think about this? Can I take it in one place? I think one other thing that's running through this along with this topic is he wants to kind of criticize this, and like he even says this in his preface. He wrote much later, but he wants to criticize people who, and this is in Human to Human as well. He wants to criticize people who kind of, they think that because something makes you uncomfortable, it's bad, right? That if something kind of is off-putting to you, it must necessarily be bad. And he kind of wants to drive a wedge in between these two opinions. He wants to say that's not always true, and that if you do that, if you fall into this thing where like I'm only going to do what kind of gets me at a gut level. If it gut level makes me feel good, I'm going to do it. And if it gut level makes me feel bad, I'm going to run away from it. I really think this is true. I think it links up with this, with the first theme we were talking about too. This kind of drive to be pure, this fear of ambiguity, right? And the fact that like looking at yourself, reflecting on yourself, or even not even grasping something totally, allowing yourself to have concepts that maybe don't capture the whole thing and leave you with this kind of really bad feeling people don't like. So they run. It's all good. It's all bad. Oof, I'm done. I'm finished. Right. It makes you feel much better to have it all cleanly wrapped up like that.
Or through a sense of vanity, even like, I have a control of the world. I know what's going on. And when people ask you, you know, maybe they want to stand up and say, well, I've spoken to God, or I know God's will, or whatever it is. I'm a philosopher, so therefore I know exactly. I mean, it's wrapped up in vanity too.
Yes. Oh, definitely. And I like this, like in this, Nietzsche kind of starts pointing out, he says like, well, that's not always the case. Like stuff in virtue of being new, stuff in virtue, in the virtue of the fact that you're not used to it. It's off-putting. It makes you feel a little weird. It makes you feel a little awkward, but it might be one of the greatest things that happened to you. Right. He even talked about, I think in here he brings out even how like science itself, the very process of science, this arriving at the truth, it was just new for a while. It's suspicious because we weren't used to it, but it ended up producing a lot of wonderful, wonderful stuff. And then later on, after people are used to it, they're like, oh yeah, that's great. That stuff.
Yeah.
But you know, it's,
these are the short-sighted nature again of the same person that would say, I don't want it to rain anymore.
yes.
It's the same person that doesn't want to encounter these works that challenge them. I love this passage 58, dangerous books.
Ah, yes.
Encountering dangerous books. He said, somebody remarked, I can tell by my own reaction to it that this book is harmful. But let him only wait, and perhaps one day he will admit to himself that this same book has done him a great service by bringing out the hidden sickness of his heart and making it visible. And I love this other thing. He says, they illuminate the individual aspects of the constellation of his personality, yes, which had hitherto remained dark and unrecognizable. I mean, it's such a short-sighted vision of the world to kind of run only to what's immediately pleasurable. It is connected to that fear of lighting up those dark areas that you're not comfortable with, those uncomfortable motivations, right? And these dangerous books, these things you're uncomfortable with, but they can actually help you see those places. They can actually bring to light what's hidden in you. And yeah. Vanity too, we didn't cover this, but just in this earlier part here, Vanity too, not only does it start chafing away or eliminating parts of the world that you don't find you're not comfortable with, it starts eliminating you, right? Aspects of your personality that you don't find comfortable, right? Forgetfulness is a common way to do that. You know, you simply shift away into the back of your brain everything you don't want to deal with into some other part. And this is going to be, I don't know, I think it's going to be part of the theme of art too. Is what's going on with art is one of these things here is this passage, the dangerous books.
Yes.
They'll light up the constellations of your soul in a way that you don't know. I mean, by the time you get here, Nietzsche really wants you to really seriously grasp the idea, wrestle with the idea that you don't know yourself very well. And there are ways to come to know yourself, but maybe not through just simple introspection. Sometimes does that happen, right? You need other techniques. Sometimes people can be very poor judges of who they are simply by looking inward, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I just of course there's that section. Which section is that where Nietzsche says like a lot of your character has been determined by experiences that you haven't had, right? So much of yourself that you don't know, right? So you are unaware of large chunks of your character simply by the fact that you haven't had a lot of experiences that might tell you a lot more. But also, on your point about vanity, I did like the section. It's kind of a quippy section, but I liked it. 38, where he says, to him who denies his vanity, he says, he who denies he possesses vanity usually possesses it in so brutal a form, he instinctively shuts his eyes to it so as to not be obliged to despise himself.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, you're like, I agree with you. Like parts of you start to disappear with this vanity too. You say, well, that's not me. That's not a part of me. That can't be a part of me.
Yeah, I mean, they darken the world, like we were talking about before. This is the theme of kind of darkening the world to not have to look at the ugly aspects of your life. And the same way that, and he accuses Kant right in the beginning, right, of saying, well, Kant did this via reason. He used clever reasons and methodology to darken the world. In other words, to find the limits of reason, so that he could kind of enact his prejudices, which was a little God wrapped up in the thing in itself. Right. This is the fear, isn't it? That you darken the world because you're afraid, and maybe through vanity too, of that darkness of your motivations, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I love this wrapping theme. It wraps up in every single one of these. It's in here all the time, repeating and again and again.
And just on this whole theme too, like he sees this. I mean, art comes up towards the end of these sections. There's all the sections start becoming about art, but I mean, this whole thing starts reappearing in art as well. This kind of where he especially says, especially young people, which, yeah, I kind of agree. Like he says, young people, especially young people, but maybe not only, but especially young people, are very extreme in their opinions on art, in the sense that they either really love it or they really hate it. It's all good or it's all bad. There couldn't be anything, in between. They got to love it wholesale.
Yeah, it's one of the most disappointing things I've really found with a lot of people when it comes to, I don't know, not only the internet, although the internet and YouTube is a major part of this, right? When I see people's reactions, like even people's reaction to Nietzsche. Yes, yeah, I'm well aware that Nietzsche did have some problems. Schopenhauer too, by the way, he had a problem with women. I'm well aware of these things, right? But look, that's part of the package, right? And you got to accept that not everybody's going to be perfect. And, not going to speak to anyone particular on YouTube, but just because, one person has one bad character flaw doesn't necessarily mean you throw away the entire thing, right? The world isn't that way. It doesn't work that way. You got to take the good and the bad together. Sometimes, I mean, you got to realize that maybe even some of these kind of arrogant, if people accuse Nietzsche of, I don't know, being overly dramatic, and Schopenhauer being arrogant, but maybe these attitudes were one of the things that spurned them on in the first place. Maybe it was one of the things that made them the people they were. And I don't know, to play willy-nilly and say, well, you can just take that away. Maybe you can. But I don't know, Nietzsche is trying to argue that some of these things you just can't. Vanity, or the emotions, right? Let's just be honest about it. The emotions are fundamental drives, and philosophers for a long time have just ignored that. They haven't dealt with the fact that the will to knowledge is motivated more by emotion than it is to be a computer, I guess. You're not computers. It's just not the way it is.
Yes. I just, I don't know. And keeping it topical again, I guess. I don't know. It just always baffled me that people, like, I'm not going to say I buy everything that Feminist Frequency has to say, but like, I find it strange that people disagree with her. You can appreciate a piece of media while accepting it has some problems too. I think it's pretty uncontroversial, right?
Yeah, this is a pretty common, like, I mean, it's such a childish view that you can't do that. It's like a child, right? Yeah. Like, oh, my mommy and daddy are the greatest ever. It's so childish that you can't see. You can't even see the smallest blemishes in the work that you love, right? Because their ego, just like it talks about their ego and their sense of self, are so wrapped up in their fanboyism.
Yes.
Let's just put it bluntly, they're a bunch of fanboys.
Yeah.
And they're so wrapped up in their fanboyism that they can't see out of their little box.
Yeah.
They put themselves in.
I mean, and it just speaks to themselves too. I mean, they see themselves, as Nietzsche says, as a piece as a piece of the work, right? Like I think this is section 161, is it? Like, and by criticizing the work, you're kind of criticizing them, right? And they can't take that. Like they don't want to be criticized because they see themselves so much at peace with the work. Right.
And I don't know. I mean, like this is a lot of there's a lot of different reasons here: social isolation, the breakdown of community in the modern world, you know, breakdown of tradition. All so many things are contributing to this. So there's not just one thing going on here. There's also changing demographics, all this other stuff. Okay, blah blah blah. I love passage 132 though, because right again, fanboys all need to they really need to take a break. They really do see the world through little boxes, don't they? I love passage 132. The great men of art, that enthusiasm for a cause which you great men bear into the world cripples the reason of many others. To know this is humbling, but the enthusiast, read fanboy, wears his hump with pride and joy. To this extent, you have the consolation of knowing that through you the amount of happiness in the world is increased. Yeah, so many people wear their hump with pride, don't they?
Yeah.
Like I am X fanboy all the way. I am Sony fanboy all the way. I'm an Xbox One fanboy all the way, right? It's to the point where I'm gonna blind myself to everything, right? Nothing good. The most hilarious thing would be I'm a Nietzsche fanboy or something, right? I mean, like the most ironic thing.
Most ironic, yeah.
I'm telling you not to do this.
Speaking of a bad reader, right?
Or maybe just a funny guy. Maybe
Yeah.
the funniest, most ironic guy out there. I am a Nietzsche fanboy. Here's my hump. Right. But wow, they do wear their hump with pride. And it is because they're desperate for something else, right? They're desperate for other things, right? It's once you bought into this, then that's when the fantasy begins, right? This is what he warns about in, I think it was passage 6 or something, that, you know, he's like, well, liars only lie to other people. But people in the fantasy world, they have to lie to themselves.
Yeah.
Don't put yourself there, because that's where you're headed.
Yeah, there were some really nice comments on art. I really liked when he said that, what is it? When he talks about aesthetics, he said like the people with no sense of aesthetics are the ones who go to the extremes in fanaticism about art because they don't have an aesthetic conscience, right? They just kind of just take whatever's thrown at them and they just run with it. Whereas if you have an aesthetic conscience, you're willing to be critical of it a little bit. You're willing to say, well, this is a good here. I don't agree with what happens so much here. But a lot of people just they're not even in the game. It's more something along the lines, like you said, like it's just an ego boost. And like, you know, I mean, that's
self-forgetting. It's a really, I mean, they just want to lose themselves completely.
And then it kind of gets into this viral, that kind of this spiral too, where it's kind of if it's a work that haunts you, if it's a work that makes you critical of yourself, those aren't going to be the ones that people are jumping all over or in this kind of fanboyism, right? It's usually going to be works that feed into the ego, not works that make you question yourself too. So it just more and more just this ego spin.
It's so many great passages in art. One of the earliest ones, obviously 28 too, where he talks about by what kind of philosophy art is corrupted. And this works in with maybe anything, maybe not just in general, but also philosophy and thinking. This works in with relativism that we talked about in the tetralogue. But this is a very important point. This, again, it shows you that Nietzsche is not the guy you think he is, maybe. Some people think he is. He's not some kind of, I don't know, hippie out there or something. And he's not some kind of devil nihilist. Yeah, devil. I mean, listen to this passage. I mean, and really listen to it. Like, seriously, don't just be like, God is dead. Okay. So when the myths of a metaphysical, mystical philosophy succeed in rendering all aesthetic phenomena opaque, it follows that they are also incapable of being evaluated against one another, because each of them has become inexplicable. If, however, they are never again compared with one another for the purpose of evaluation, there at last arises an uncritical frame of mind, a blind toleration. but likewise a steady decline in the enjoyment of art, which really does happen.
Yeah.
You just have to follow a community long enough, and you'll see this happen. The more this enjoyment declines, however, the more the desire for art is transformed back into a vulgar hunger, which the artist then seeks to satisfy with ever coarser fare. The artistic sense is something that has to be cultivated.
Yeah.
It has to be bred and taught and continued by work. Otherwise, it will willingly just go down to base satisfaction. Like, oh, you want to fly, it'll just turn into a bunch of, I don't know, summer blockbusters, explosion, breasts, fast cars,
Yeah.
Michael Bay, and that's all it will be. I mean, if you want to have Transformers, yeah, every movie Transformers, well, there's your flight. Well, it's all, don't even bother comparing it. Don't be critical. It's all just going to be Transformers forever now.
Yeah.
And if you don't watch Transformers and throw up a little, come on. Either you're really young, or I don't know what's going on. You really have a hard-on for robots or something.
Either that or you've decoded the most difficult puzzle in the universe.
Yeah, it's
right?
something
It's actually just a work of genius.
Well, I mean, I'm willing. I don't want to be one of these kind of elitists. And Nietzsche says too, like, he suggests too, like, okay, just because a passage is short, don't start judging it just because to think, well, it's short, so it's just kind of a off the cuff kind of thing. Some of these short passages are deceptive because they're well thought out, mature fruits of the mind. In the same way, I am more than willing to accept cartoons, anime, movies, puppet shows, poems. I don't care. Anything can have that spark of wisdom and joy and philosophy. Anything can. So that is not what I'm saying. Just because they use CG effects and it's Michael Bay and Transformers. No, the Transformers could be really, really awesome. Not with Michael Bay though. It's just not going to happen with Michael Bay. Again, this is not another trap to fall into.
Yeah, I just want to throw it, if there's in our little discussion here, if there's one section that I read and I reread, and I think I know what he's talking about. But I'm not sure if the translation was wrong or what, but it really threw me for a loop because I don't know. Like didn't this section make you weird a little bit? I love it though. I like it. It's section 118. He puts this Latin phrase that means beauty is for the few. But the paragraph itself is very strange. He says, and Nietzsche says, history and experience tell us that the monstrosity which secretly rouses the imagination and bears it beyond actuality and the everyday is older and of more abundant growth than the beautiful and the cult of beauty and art. And that if the sense for the beautiful grows dim, it at once breaks exuberantly out again. It seems that the great majority of men have greater need of it than they do of the beautiful, no doubt because it contains a stronger narcotic. Sex? I think it's just a flashy, aggressive kind of style. Okay. Whether it be sex or violence, explosions, like Michael Bay. Right. This is what'll just burst out. It's waiting there. I mean, like, it's just always there. So there's no need to worry about, I don't know, sex and violence going away, right? That's like the grass man. Yeah, that's going to be there. Don't worry, right? Like, we're never going to lose that. We have to worry about, like, losing really, really great, thoughtful films. Because those could go away. I mean, there's no reason they have to be there. Yeah. I mean, they lose the funding, it's gone. Yeah, then you're short this kind of new perspective on the work, and I think he's dead on here, and it is a narcotic, right? Because Nietzsche likes this is kind of where I get a little bit fuzzy here, because he distinguishes between art that's a kind of a narcotic, born from a need and a despair, maybe with their own life. In other words, they need this kind of, I don't know, explosions and violence to feel like a man or more in control of their life or something. Or maybe they're just bored, he suggests at one time. Yeah. You're just bored. You're just bored like a child is bored, which is fine. That can happen too. And then there's this other kind of more higher level art, which comes from a sense of beauty and calm and overcoming, a sense of having overcome something in yourself
that makes you see yourself a little bit deeper. Maybe it comes from a joy. He even says it's cool and cold sometimes. It comes from a clear thought.
Yeah, yeah.
But these themes kind of this does reverberate later into Nietzsche too.
Yeah. What? Yes, this role that art plays, where at least here anyway, he just makes it out. It's like some of this art is going to be kind of almost transformative. It's gonna, but it's not gonna be. That's why I kind of like the section in the beginning where he talks about the joy of the historian. I think was that. I can't. What section was that? I should have that written down. Happiness of the Historian, section 17, where he says he talks about this historian up in the sun or whatever, and he says, this guy, he says, in whom history again and again transforms not only his spirit but also his heart, and who in contrast to the metaphysicians is happy to harbor in himself not an immortal soul but many mortal souls, right? So I mean, it's not going to be this kind of fakery. It's not going to be all this fakery. It's going to be real mortal stuff. But it's, I mean, it's that. Again, that doesn't mean it's sex and violence. Woo! No, right? That's not what that means. But it means we're gonna get rid of these lies. We're gonna get rid of all this fake stuff. But like I thought this kind of also fit in with what you were saying just now too.
Yeah. And I don't know, why don't we just, I mean, we talked quite a bit, and I want to jump to some more. I mean, we need to talk, maybe if we have time, I want to talk about determinism, because that does come in here. The vanity prevents us from seeing determinism. Now, that's going to be a more controversial thing, interesting as it is. But I want to talk about, and that also comes to the punishment and reward, too, which is another thing. But let's talk about the purpose of art.
Okay.
Which is going to be important, because a large section of this is art. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure now. Okay, so there's a long talk about art, and what is the role that art is playing in this. I know it's kind of be weird to isolate this, but I know that for art, Nietzsche has a lot of redemptive purposes in life. It can allow you to kind of perfect it and beautify it and see it as an ideal. But what do you think what passages do you think here are kind of letting us know how he feels about art at this moment in his life? I mean, like one thing I'm getting, I feel like there's two things, but one thing is that, again, art can light up the darkness inside. Art can be a kind of self-exploration that lets you know who you really are, because you don't know. And you're lucky to have art to light up those dark stars inside of you, to let you know who you are. And I guess my evidence for that would be multiple passages 58, 76, 145. For example, 76 it talks about dreams. This sounds like sounds Freudian, but he says, when we're unsure of something, just wait for the dream, and it'll inform us without any ambiguity. Well, I mean, he's often compared art to a kind of dream state too. And, like art, right? It maybe makes us more honest in a certain way. I always like this, and passage 145 was just
145.
I thought it was just great.
Yeah, me too.
The value of honest books.
Yeah.
Honest books make the reader honest, at least to the extent that they lure out his antipathy and hatred, which cunning and prudence otherwise knows best how to conceal. Against a book, however, we may let ourselves go, however much we may restrain ourselves when it comes to men. It's one of those places where we can really be honest with ourselves. Art. It can really, it can affect us in a way that, like when people are watching, it's hard to cry or even be angry or hold back anger all the time. Anything, right? With a book, that kind of melts away.
Yeah, kind of opens up a space. Maybe you can actually try stuff out. You can experiment with, and you can let out some of the feelings you don't usually let out in normal life. Definitely, I think this is going to be important too, as Nietzsche progresses to this idea of art, bringing out these parts of your soul and like highlighting them and allowing you to maybe work with them. I like that section a lot too. The ones you picked are great. I also picked out when it comes to art, I picked out a couple other than the ones you highlighted. 99, the poet as signpost to the future, where he says like, there's going to be these artists who kind of develop an ideal or a fair image of man, and they kind of like promote it or make that ideal attractive. This is going to be a type of art that kind of promotes a future development, a higher growth.
I like that because that's going to mix in with my second idea. What's going on here is I kind of feel like art also, because he says it's better to create art than even to take it in. And the reason why that would be, I think, is because that's kind of like in the purest form, you're getting your idea out there on paper, right? And he says the best way to critique someone is to see their ideal, and that's what he wants these poets to do, is point the way to the future, point out the ideal. In other words, their ideal. Show me who you are. Show me what you really are. I think that kind of works in with another idea.
Right, and then we get a clear idea of who you are.
Yeah.
In your reaction at your ideal. Yeah. So maybe even in the creative process, you express some of the most innermost parts of your character too. I like that. And also like kind of on this, what you said about section 109, where he says living with what section 109?
Living without art and wine.
Living without art and wine. Is that the right one?
Yeah.
Works of art are like wine. It is better if one has need of neither, keeps to water, and through one's own inner fire and sweetness of soul, again transforms the water into wine on one's own accord. But he actually touches on this a little bit later too, where he says it's kind of having art versus having works of art. And it's weird. He says like the work of art is like a dessert. It's like a sweet dessert. And like, it's like we, I guess us normal people who go to like the theater and we want to see, I don't know, Mad Max, Fury Road. That's the dessert, right? That's the dessert that George Miller served us or whatever, right? So we go and we eat the dessert and we expect that to be the life-changing thing. And Nietzsche kind of wants to say, well, maybe what would be best is if you learned how to cook, or if you had that artistic sense, if you yourself approach life with this artistic sense, this would be the most transformative thing for you. This would help you transform your life too. I mean, this is going to be a theme going into the gay science and further on, right? This idea is going to be much more strongly developed. And two books from now, one book, a book and that, next one Daybreak, next one Gay Science. But
yeah. I don't know. I think I do. Maybe next time we can bring up determinism and guilt and blame, which do come up several times, and we haven't. I mean, I know they're there. We didn't ignore them, but I want to keep this distinct, and I think we did a pretty good job of getting around some of the parts that I wanted to get to here. And I want to keep this shorter than our usual ones.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you have any other kind of passages you want to bring up here, or anything you want to say about this? I guess if not, then I'll say one last thing, and we can. I mean, there's a lot of great passages.
There's a lot of great stuff in here. I mean, just two general statements, and then I think I'm done. Number one, there's a lot of interesting sections in here where Nietzsche talks about how to write well, stuff like that. Like, and when Nietzsche starts talking about how to write well, that's when I prick up my ears. I'm like, whoa, I'm getting writing lessons from one of the greatest prose writers in history, right? Whoa, okay, take note. So those are pretty fascinating. If you want to take a look at those, it's easy to find. And I think also no, I think that's pretty good for me. Other than that, yeah.
The only other passage that I just want to say, just because we need to say it more, is passage 153. A good book takes its time.
Yeah.
I say the same thing of a movie. A good movie takes its time. I mean, like a lot of our classics were received with a meh.
Yeah.
Meh, shining, meh. You know, these things take their time. And, you know, will the Avengers be around in 20 years? Or will anyone remember it? Well, time will tell us. Time will tell us. I don't know if anyone's been watching those Thor movies very much.
Yeah.
Just my guess.
Cracked did a really interesting podcast on that too, where they kind of took movies. They looked at the top movie list from like, what was it, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and they like tried to remember if they could remember half of them, and they couldn't remember more than half. And usually the ones that won movie of the year, totally forgot.
Yeah. So I know time does tell us generally. I mean, maybe some of these, if this is a success, I don't know, but it does. I think you really need to take your time when you start saying things are classic. Like, as much as I love listening to Movie Bob, I don't know. It's too soon to start calling like the Avengers classic. We need to wait a good 5 years easily before we start making judgments like that. We need to spin our spider webs and rethink about it, and to look at actually the general effect it had. Good books take time. They really do. And good movies take their time. So, and you'll see, time will sift away mostly.
That's got to be one of the toughest parts of being like a critic. Like, I mean, and like I always watch Movie Bob and stuff like this. I mean, it's just got to be one of the most difficult parts of it. And I mean, it's the best thing to do is just be open to saying like, I was wrong. Maybe I totally was mistaken in my opinion about the aesthetic value of that. So,
and obviously critics are often wrong. I'm often wrong too about this, but I think it's something that maybe should humble us a little bit more. I know maybe the Academy Awards, like Cracked says, shouldn't be held that year.
Yeah.
Like having the Academy Awards for like 5 years ago. Like, you remember these movies, guys? Yeah, you don't remember those, do you? Okay. So maybe it sifts away some of the hype.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't know. For a lot of hungry viewers, some of the top movies don't even make an effect anyway. So I don't know.
It's true.
The hungry guests at the plate of art. Something else we should have talked about, but oh well.
Yeah.
So other than that, Nietzsche's got a bunch of great passages in here. I highly recommend you read this book. It's just enjoyable. It's just it's a delight. And Nietzsche is a little bit more, not to say he's not honest in all his books, he is. And he's very direct in all his books. You know, he's known, but you can see the connections. You can see the thought process worked out so clearly here. The other books kind of feel like this base and then rocketed off to the future, right? Kind of taken more intensely, more worked out, more stylized, more intense.
Yeah.
But these ground-based theories where Nietzsche's coming from, if you want to be a Nietzsche guy, and hey, gotta love Nietzsche, these early works are really a good goldmine as to where he's coming from. Don't ignore them. Read them. These are important works. I know Kaufman, he translated the end works, which is good, and I love Kaufman, but these early works are just as important, I think. So it takes some of that edge off of Nietzsche that people don't, maybe like they take too much as his main personality. Nietzsche was a clever, interesting thinker, and has to be understood in the light of all of his works. Not just like the Antichrist or something.
Yeah.
No, there's a whole body of work here that you're just ignoring. There's a very thoughtful man here.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe we should just like end this video on the same point we started, which is like, just because these things are fragmentary doesn't mean there's not a holistic thing that's going on. So definitely next week we're gonna come back and try and like maintain this put the whole thing together, and let's not put Nietzsche, like fragment Nietzsche too much too. And let's keep the whole together for Nietzsche and see, because there's like, and you can see in this book too, he talks about overcoming, and writing should be a kind of overcoming. So he's constantly overcoming himself. I mean, you got to respect that. You can, when you read the earlier stuff, you can clearly see how much he's willing to attack himself. How much he's willing to criticize himself. As much as he might seem to be like this crazy guy who's like yelling at all these people. I mean, Nietzsche's yelling at himself a lot. Do people catch that? Do they catch that? I don't know. I hope so.
Definitely. All right. So that'll wrap it up for this time. And we're going to continue to read to the end of Assorted Opinions and Maxims for next time. So this section will be completed next time. And we'll talk about that. And hopefully we can have some more interesting conversations. All right. See you next time.